Again, you are here with the gang, me and TMC. TMC, how you doing tonight?
Andy, I'm great. How are you?
I am just fine, and we're in just a sec to get our community guidelines out of the way, and that's just a kind of a necessary thing to do. And we do that so that we kind of set the stage for people to understand where we're coming from and what we claim to be and do not claim to be. And as well as that, to give a little bit of credit to some of the other content providers, which we feature from time to time on our shows. And so it's just procedural, and we try to ask you to bear with us on that. So that being said, the purpose of this video is not to incite fear, violence, or harass in any way, but to share and exchange thoughts and ideas with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject. This encourages conversation and awareness. The opinions expressed in the video belong solely to the persons expressing them and are not a representation of the channel, Cyberhumanfrontiers. None of our videos claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice. The content is created entirely for your entertainment. From time to time, the video and other shows on this channel may contain certain copyrighted works not specifically authorized to be used by the copyright holder, but which we believe in good faith are protected by federal law and the fair use doctrine for one or more of the reasons noted in the Copyright Act of 1976. And you will find at the conclusion of our show and shortly thereafter, there will be links below the video in the show notes that will tell you where you can source some of the content that we showed you and that we brought to you. So thanks everybody for being here with us. And I want to get started straight away. Let's just talk a little bit, if we can, about our episode from 2 weeks ago. And the title of that was The Psychology of Privacy. And then, and that was brief, wasn't it? And we're going to talk about the show that we did last week, which was Surveillance and You. And now that's kind of interesting because it kind of rolls up a little bit together with the privacy thing and the psychology thing and the new world that we're living in. And it's coming. It's been coming along for quite a while. It's kind of, I guess you could say it's been scaling up since the dawn of the year 2001 and forward. The world has changed quite remarkably and very quickly in a lot of ways. There are forces at work today which are able to be exploited by the advanced technology that's present around us today that are redefining our privacy at many levels in many ways. You walk down the street and you see all sorts of cameras. There are metrics on all sorts of biological parameters of us with wearables. There are smartphones, smart devices. And on this show, we feature all kinds of things. Anyway, without going on too long on that, what I want to do is get right into something. And it's just a little bit by way of review. And let's see here. We're going to get this up on the share. TMC, any opening thoughts?
No, not at all. Except for these issues are directly related. They're directly
interconnected, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
You can't have one go without impacting the other. So.
Yep.
Anyway.
And there's really, if you go and look, it's not something that you're going to hear on the nightly news, all right? But if you do and go and look out on the internet, there's a whole lot of quite legitimate information about what's going on and how it's happening. So I have here, and this is just one example. This is I'll get it in the show notes for this week if it's not, but it was in from last week. Anyway, this was just a little article here. Experiencing the Surveillance Society. And by way of just going into like kind of an overview, because I got a few other things here. We have plenty that we want to get to. A new breed of surveillance has emerged, and that new breed of surveillance is a new word. It's called dataveillance. And what that means is that is information that's harvested through people's use of all of those super convenient devices that we love to use. And and that you can read this. I don't want to, it's a very well-written article, and it's kind of long, but I'll just paraphrase. It's clear that we're living in an increasingly technologically sophisticated society as electronic devices of various sorts become inextricably embedded in our lives. Internet and mobile phone use has exploded since the 1990s. And of course, social networking, Facebook, Twitter, they're all being used quite heavily, and many other social media platforms too, which just as a side note, I would encourage you to check out, because there are plenty of alternatives to those two. Anyway, we are now, we know relatively little about how ordinary people experience surveillance. Social psychologists have noted that one of the offshoots of the findings of the Stanford prison experiment was they partially replicated that they partially replicated for a BBC documentary was the importance of surveillance. They state that psychology needs to devote far more effort to developing a science for surveillance. So there's work being done at the institutional level, psychological institutions, industry, all sorts of organizations coming to bear. Let me go to another one. These are a couple of things that we hadn't quite gotten to the way that I had wanted to previously. So
I have a question. I had a question about the last one, or maybe something.
I'll put it right back up. Here it is.
Yeah. What does that last sentence essentially mean to you, ironically enough, about psychology and the question I just proposed being one of those open-ended types of questions that a psychologist
it kind of means, it kind of means that they're interested in, they're interested in turning it into a science. In other words, turning it into something real. And it doesn't have to be anything real unless we happen to be surveilled everywhere that we go. There's nothing that needs to be real about it at all. But theorizing surveillance?
No, it's understanding how a person responds to being under persistent surveillance.
Exactly.
And then the subsets thereof. What types of surveillance are you comfortable with? And what types of surveillance are you uncomfortable with? And how do we repurpose and repackage and rebrand surveillance applications in ways that
to make it friendly
to the general public, exactly, so that they're warm and welcoming and they're invited into the home, something like an AI assistant, for example,
right,
or otherwise.
And we could go on. Although people are part of this assemblage, much of, and they're working on this. Much of the surveillance studies literature focuses on the technology and on the surveillors rather than on the surveilled. So I think the takeaway that we both want you to have in listening to us here is know that there is a lot of study and a lot of science going into how they're going to do exactly what TMC just said, package it and make it acceptable and make it as ubiquitous as possible too, by the way, and make it as comfortable, pleasant, even enticing by way of you being anxious and wanting to use have your experience in your technologically interconnected world, because it's so much fun. And of course, while that's happening, there's all sorts of observation and
here's this about
surveillance that's going on.
Here's this about that. In order for the Internet of Things to appear and be intuitive and graceful and elegant and useful to a person, then AI, the cloud, the system, the matrix, whatever cliche you want to put on it, needs to understand an individual with a great deal of intimacy, with a great deal of specificity.
Yes.
Or granularity, so that the experience that individual has is comfortable, seamless, graceful, elegant, somewhat natural, so that it is not rejected.
Right. Even pleasant.
Yes.
Go so far as to say that it could even be packaged into something that's pleasant.
Yes.
And what, for example, on social networking sites such as Facebook, what do? There are games that are designed. There are interactive interface with the platform that is specifically designed to make people have a little dopamine rush, a little bit of happiness when they interact with it. So while that's happening, of course, data is being logged, the choices and selections and the navigation that a person does, as well as where they go, who they talk to, and what they're posting, is all saved. So it is like you can't use that thing without doing exactly what this sentence says. People disclose all kinds of personal data. You literally can't use it and have it be the experience that you have possibly become used to it being without doing a whole lot of disclosure. And
you are not able to simulate. You are not able to simulate the life that you want or think that you want without giving up your personal information and your privacy.
That's
you can't
right.
do it. You just can't do it.
Exactly. Why don't we buzz through, as long as this some of the stuff we always run out of time because we got so much that we want to bring to you and we want to empower you with knowledge. We always run out of time. Do you want to buzz through this a little bit? It's that new term for surveillance being dataveillance, and maybe we'll just buzz through this a little bit.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So let me pick it up right here. All of this data, and of course, it's the data from your interacting with these platforms. And I'm not going to just get us stuck on just Facebook. It would happen with any of a number of other platforms, including some of the things that you can experience using Google and other social media platforms.
Anywhere, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, it doesn't matter. If there's an app, it's tracking you in some fashion. That's just part of the deal at this point.
That's true.
Even higher on the food chain you go, the higher on the food chain you go, the more data resources you get. What I mean by that is this. Think about a small app, a company that's out there making 99 cents on an app, and they've got 500,000 downloads. So it's a small app when you look at what's on the app store for something like Apple. Okay.
Right.
They have access to your phone or your computer or your tablet or whatever, and whatever they need to be able to provide you the service that you're looking for, which is why you downloaded the app. All that said, this app needs to have a home for the core components of its software. That home typically is stored in the cloud. They're going to go to known providers to do things like targeted marketing and network and resource management on the back end with respect to their database and how they process and compute information, all of that stuff. And what I'm talking about is software that becomes products and services that these apps, for example, one example of many, products and services as software that these app companies use.
Exactly.
They come with strings attached, just like the services that you want. They come with strings attached. So anywhere in this supply chain of software that becomes virtual services, anywhere in the supply chain, you have storage of this intellectual property or asset known as software, or both, whatever you want to call it, on somebody's platform. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, it doesn't matter, the big tech platforms. So what I'm getting at is the higher on the food chain you go, the more data streams you have. And we're at the point now where the infrastructure almost, I don't want to use the analogy of cancer, but considering the infringement as it relates to the
octopus tentacles.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and use the word cancer because there's a blatant disrespect at this point for the values of American values, right? But wait a minute. Hold on. The reason I use the analogy of cancer, man, is because you have large amounts of blood flow in cancer that's pulling away resources that healthy tissue needs, and ultimately that's how the body dies with cancer. That's what's happening with data at this point. So an app on your phone or something that you sign up to subscribe to or whatever, and you're exchanging some type of information, it's a dime a dozen now because because the supply lines are so thick and aggregated up at those monolithic, monopolistic levels. And this is how these companies in partnership, as they share information and share resources, what I mean by that is computing power, infrastructure, internet stuff, they essentially become more powerful than countries as a result of having access to all of the information that governments need, want, use, and also subscribe to. But in addition to that, are able to leverage everything that they have, their political power, their infrastructure power, their everything. They're able to leverage that against governments at the same time because of these monolithic supply lines that they have of data, which also is directly correlated with revenue. So
you know what else is going on?
Up all the, what? Go ahead.
You know what else is going on? They're starting to become more of a monolithic supply chain of the actual products. Has anybody looked at the size of Amazon lately? So it's not only, are you going to go to your corner hardware store where they're going to have half the supply and twice the price, okay? Or are you going to just dial it up on Amazon and have it show up by drone in 3 days, or not dropped at you? Maybe not by drone yet, but that'll be coming soon, right? Okay, what would you do? Now, what's that fueled by? And don't you go back to what you were saying, because I got like 3 or 4 questions for you when you finished the track you were on. That's monolithic. You were on the monolithic piece.
That's basically it. What's been done is this overlay of a revenue stream that is congruent with a data stream. The more the data, right, the greater the revenue stream, but it's inverted. The greater the revenue stream up at the top, but the supply chain, if you will, and at the grassroots level, those revenue streams aren't necessarily as good anymore because they're a dime a dozen. It's like anything else, supply and demand. But the supply and demand, the economic structure in and of itself in the digital space has been cornered. And it's been cornered just about every step of the way. And I think philosophically, without being able to cite any specific reference off the top of my head, I think that's been an underlying strategy. Corner the markets as you roll out technology so that anything that gets away from you, any innovation that gets away from you, it doesn't really get too much out of control, because hopefully you can get your arms wrapped around these things as they surface in the economy as innovation occurs, and not have too many of them get away from you. And I really think that big tech and the energy or the entities behind that in general have done a pretty good job over the last 50, 60 years.
Do you see how do you see how that's got an analogy with big companies subsuming smaller ones, consuming them and absorbing them? That's also got something to do with it. And I'm talking about companies that might supply end users, such as consumers. They'll just buy them up. I don't care if it's the big cable company buying the small one, but that whole idea, you got to ask yourself the question, how is it that you can get more products cheaper and faster from a monster company such as, well, we mentioned Amazon, but there are some others, versus at what point did the competitiveness of the small local supplier or local distributor start to become go in the wrong direction? And they just can't. They can't match the speed, the selection, or the price. Yeah. And then I was going to go to another question, but go back to you.
Yeah, I think that precipice came and went, and I think that the whole lockdown thing, the year of economic restriction, forced contraction, just accelerated that. And the real underlying answer is this: when a small business or a local supplier or whatever, right, when they are forced to use the monolithic corporate cookie cutter supply chain system in some form or another, we'll just call it supply chain for now because you're thinking of a business, so they're providing a tangible something, right? So we'll just call it supply chain. As soon as they're forced into that model, then at some point, so much commerce goes through the consolidated monolithic model that you can do something like forced economic contractions and have it do exponential damage because you don't have redundant infrastructure, because it's so exorbitantly expensive to
go the opposite way.
To buy something for 10 cents versus buying something for $1 per unit, so you can have redundancy, or so you can have something made in America or made locally. Most businesses aren't going to do that. they're not gonna do it.
Nope.
And it's gonna take a serious contraction to entice business to invest, if you will, their energy and their time up front for that extra value later, to rebuild value in an economy after it's been decimated. And I really, unfortunately, think that's what most countries, or a lot of countries, are going to be looking at as a real tangible problem, economic issue in, you fill in the blank, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it's going to take to go through this controlled implosion, this controlled tempering that the entire species is going through right now. Anyway, I'm rambling.
There's quite a few offshoots to this. When we vote, well, one thing that we do at the level of the masses, the little people like all of us here, and thanks for everybody being with us out in the chat. It's awesome. I know you're there, and we're so happy. Is, let's just say this: big monster companies, a few big monster companies versus a whole lot of small independent ones, that's bad. But what has drawn us into it is those big companies have made things so easy and so convenient for us. So we get a short-term benefit, but if you play it out in the long term, we will end up having less choice, less diversity in the choices of what we may be able to buy, where it's coming from. And like we've seen it with I don't know, I could pull cable companies as an example. There used to be so many small cable companies around, and they were bought up by a few very, very, very large ones. And now, much of the program choices are set. Much of the price structure is elevated to pretty much whatever those few big monster companies choose to set those prices at. And there is no small independent cable company anymore, at least not anywhere near where I live. All right. There used to be 3 of them. Within a radius of 6 towns, there used to be 3 cable companies. That's just one example. So people are driven to go to the convenience of some of those big centralized monster companies because they make things initially very price competitive and, a very, very streamlined and responsive consumer experience. But in the long run, once there's no one to compete with them, then they have a monopoly. And there was, once upon a time, we had one big phone company, and there was this thing that came up where they decided to break up that one big monopoly. And it wasn't even that bad. But the principle of it was not to have one monster company, but to allow smaller competitors to come in. Somewhere along the line in the last 20 years, we seem to have lost that philosophy, because now you have big pharmaceutical companies and just a few. There isn't a plethora of little tiny ones. There are a few monsters. Media companies, news companies, a few monsters. I got to say, I don't know exactly how he did it, but Mr. Bezos grew a giant company, and that is a monster, right? And would you really have any choice? I mean, you got any choice to be able to tell Amazon, I only want to buy American? Or are you just going to have to get what you got to get, and it's going to be what they have available for you to choose from? So little by little, when we vote with our participation, and when we vote in the case of what we're talking about with products, when we vote with our dollars, in the long run, we're actually losing a huge amount. We're losing a whole lot at the local level and a whole lot in the freedom of choice level. And that ties back into all of this stuff with the technology and our use of the technology, because that is it's a complete parallel to the convenience in the consumer buying experience, the convenience of pulling out your smart device and being able to use it. But what comes along with that? Immense amounts of data harvesting about you and me. How much of it is doing? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I still share real quick?
Oh yeah, take it. Yep.
Yeah, yep. I want to on that note, right? It was a good thing to say right there. This is that patent that floated around a little while ago, right? That 2020-06-0606 Microsoft patent, the cryptocurrency system using body activity.
Yep.
Right? Remember that? So
Yep.
data valence, surveillance, where this is all going, folks, is something like this. And what I want to show you here is...
Yeah, TMC, take this for just a minute. I'm going to go grab a glass of water. It'll only take me 30 seconds. Be right with you. I'm listening too. Go for it.
So I want to show you in the summary here what this says. And it says here that this disclosure may use human body activity associated with a task provided to a user. So you have some function you need to do today. How many widgets are you turning out? How many sales did you make? How many calls did you make? How many houses did you go to? How many tickets did you deal with? How many trouble tickets did you work on? That kind of stuff, right? For example, brainwave or body heat emitted from the user when the user performs a task provided by information or a service provider, and some examples that they're using here, right? Something like viewing an advertisement.
Yeah,
or using
look at that.
Certain internet services, right? When the brain waves are measured while someone is doing something like watching an ad or using an internet service like YouTube or Hulu or online gambling or online video gaming, something like that, the brain waves can be used in the mining of cryptocurrency. And here's what it says about that. Instead of massive computation work required by some conventional cryptos, hashtag Bitcoin, data generated based on body activity of the user can be proof of work. And therefore, a user can solve the computationally difficult problem unconsciously. So what's going on in the background?
Wow.
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, right? Mind, body, and soul. What you're doing versus what you're not doing, what you think you're doing, what you're not thinking that you're doing, what you're doing subconsciously or prompted to do, perhaps without necessarily it being something that you would have naturally been inclined to do on your own, might be profitable for something that we would imagine in today's terms as a hedge fund who has an entire population like a country managing the minds and body activity of entire societies as hedge fund commodities to do things like generate mining activities for crypto, simultaneously paying your workforce and harvesting not only their physical labor, but their mental and biophysical and thermal energies. Think of it this way, as sanguinating a human, where you you draw a human out like an animal, like a deer, and you figure out the best way to most effectively extract everything you can, kind of like an Indian taking down a deer back in the day, right? Where they use everything, all the way down to the bones and the hooves and the sinew and the marrow and the everything, eyeballs, antlers, hair, all of it. Think about a human being that, and then using crypto mining activities to interface at the cellular level so that every component, every function, every aspect down to your heartbeat and your temperature is monetized and simultaneously used as mining computation for crypto. That's what this patent talks about, 0606.
That is 06. Absolutely wild. Imagine people not even knowing that they're being used essentially as an additional processing core for a larger system, and they're actually part of it, and they don't even know it, and they're doing it unconsciously. Imagine that.
Yeah. So why are we inclined to, at 9:30, get up and go get some ice cream? Why are we inclined to, pick product A versus product B at the store? Why are we inclined to stare a little too long at a picture if it's somewhat provocative, or it has, a physique or a color or something that we like, right? Something that we find pleasing to the eye. Why? Why are we inclined to do that versus not, or one type of thing, one shape or category of thing versus another? Why are you inclined to choose one versus another? The question then becomes, can it be artificially altered? Can you be disinclined?
Remember that subject who's part of this system has already been previously profiled, and that information is there for reference. So behavior versus the existing profile, observations can be made combining those two as well. The baseline for that individual, I guess, is what I was trying to say. That's already on file.
Yeah, so the Charles Lieber patents are a great example of how nanotechnology in a synthetic form really come into play with this crypto system. And
it seems so far-fetched. It seems so far out, but we're reading it. We're looking at it.
Yeah, so if you go over to like nanotech, for example, and we look at cyborg cells. This is the Lieber stuff, and what it talks about is putting nanoelectronics inside of cells so that you can actively control them, so that you can modify what they call electrogenic cells. That would be neurons and things like Purkinje cells, I think is how they're pronounced. I'm not sure.
Well, they're combo. They're combo.
Cells,
they're both biological, but they've also got some electronic tags on them as well.
Yeah, and so what they're talking about is fusing nanotech in there and being able to address it. So they're talking, they can put like 100 pieces of nanotech or so into a cell and then give the 100 pieces an address. Here it is right here in this patent right here. It talks about 50 addressable nanowires. I'll show you where you can read it. I'm reworking this website, so
that's per neuron. Yep.
It's hard to read, but I'll show you here. This is a Lieber patent, and really why I'm going down this trail here real quick is because when you look at data valence, surveillance, and we think phone, camera, microphone, some antenna stuff with radar, we kind of got that down a little bit, but this is really where it's going. It's going into the quantum space, and it's going into this idea of being able to use resonance such that you can understand very, very sensitive information about people. And in order to do that at these scales, you need to understand quantum, but that's a whole other discussion. So what this talks about here in this nanobioelectronics patent that's Harvard Charles Lieber patent, it talks about being able to insert multiple pieces of nanotech, 50 addressable nanowire elements in this case, in this example number 9, 50 addressable nanowire elements per neuron. The structure was chosen to show the capability of single cell hybrid structures at much higher density of nanoelectronic devices, but could readily be reconfigured. Listen to this.
So
for
translate,
example,
as you do this, translate. See what this means.
Yeah, so huge. What this is saying is that they've got many, many pieces of nanotech inside of a single cell. They're creating a hybrid structure, which means that the electronic functionality of that cell, a neuron or a heartbeat signal, for example, that cell having an electrical pulse biologically and electronically at the same time, such that the line is blurred. It's creating cyborg tissue. 50 addressable in this example, up here it says example 9, 50 in this case, inside of a single cell hybrid structure. And it says that it can be readily reconfigured like a field programmable gate array, readily reconfigured into structures with different geometries, nanowire device spacings, and or through multiple cells. And it says in this case that they're doing this on an optical chip, right? Figure 5 is an optical image of a chip having 6 different device arrays, nanowire elements, and associated metal interconnects. So this patent talks about putting neurons on chips and creating electronics that are using neurons as computer processors. Mm-hmm. So the computer processor it's a bio chip basically. And they also talk about in this patent doing this stuff in vivo, where you can do this stuff in the body. Here it is right here. Micropipette electrodes can stimulate and record intracellular and extracellular potentials in vitro and in vivo. So they're measuring stuff, electrical potentials inside the body with, in this case, micropipette electrodes. So
now the TMC, those of us who have been, going along with us, we've been doing these shows for a long time here now.
yeah,
This is they are already initiated in the idea of why this stuff is being done. What the goal is to come up with that, that really, really good integration of the outside computer systems and networks of computers with your brain, with your body. And so we kind of know that, but it always sets me back in my chair when I look at, we like that last one that you put up there when we're talking about the cryptocurrency stuff. It amazes me how much attention is being directed at trying to integrate humans into something else, as opposed to you just living your life, in a much more autonomous or, local nuclear family or community level. No, it's to integrate people into a much larger system. It's kind of like, it's almost like a new world order, almost.
yeah. So here's another
In a
piece
way.
of that. Here's another piece of that puzzle. Scaffolds comprising nanoelectronic components, talking about building cell scaffolds. So when you think about what some of the chatter is out there, let's just say what's going around right now, when you think about what that might look like, it's going to be this hybridization of cellular matrices, cellular scaffolds with nanotechnology fused within it that ultimately become sensors and become radios that are tuned to various frequencies that can self-assemble and then disassemble and then reassemble and then be readdressable in any of those combinations at any given time, because those cell scaffolds and cell structures don't necessarily stay rigid all the time. They'll break down, they'll change shape, they'll do all kinds of things. And when you start looking at what electromagnetics can do, is it relates to being able to manipulate protein folds, because the hydrogen bonding that's associated with the sugar structure, that's the sidewalls, if you will, of the double helix, those are highly sensitive to ionization. They're just weak bonds. So electromagnetic energy possesses the opportunity as a tool to go in there and resonate and manipulate genetic information, protein structures, enzyme formation, epigenetic switches, and on and on and on. So I say all of that for this purpose, knowing that you could very easily surmise that being able to restructure and resituate nanotechnology around an organ system or throughout an organ system is not that far-fetched when every single system has a specific resonance. It's just not that far-fetched.
Right. And if you know what you put in there, if you know what you've added on to the existing biomolecules, then you're going to know exactly what frequency and what strength and where to steer that energy so that you get those newly modified, or you take a look at all your cells and imagine that they all have a little piggyback molecule on them. And that little piggyback molecule allows those cellular structures to be manipulated from the outside. And
exactly, right? So here it is. For example, cardiac or muscle cells with the tissue may not be able to beat or contract. And they're talking about like a disease, right? So you have some issue, or may not be able to beat or contract in a regular fashion without stimuli from nanotech, nanoscale wires, or without using the nanoscale wires to communicate. Listen to this. As another example, nerve cells within the tissues may form axons and or dendrites with the nanoscale wires.
Wow.
For example, in order to transmit and receive electronic signals from other nearby nerve cells and or from the nanoscale wires. In such a fashion, any and all electrical unitary structures may be generated, right? For example, cyborg tissues can be created whose biologic functioning depends not only on the cells or the tissues, but on the electronic components, that nanotech that's
combination of the two.
Well. And it says here that the distinction between the biologic and the electronic systems become blurred. It says that.
Right, because they merge together.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Amazing.
And so that's data valence today. That's where we are today, and what we're really discussing prima facie with the articles to kind of, I guess, put some context around what data valence is and surveillance is, we're at the point in the general populace where we're looking at cameras, microphones, and some antennas. But hey, don't worry, don't worry.
We're not worried.
2 weeks, 14 days to slow the spread. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're not worried. We it's kind of good to know where that's going. And so, we with that article that we got, which I'll put back up, we're kind of looking at what is, like way downstream from that, but taking it right into how you would be surveilling and at what level one would be surveilling or controlling or influencing or interfacing with. You just saw it, and you're reading patents, and I can guarantee you that huge amount of work is going on in that field for those reasons. And now let me find that tab that we were just reading off of, which I just found.
Thank you for indulging me.
No, it's good. That's actually really good, because we zoomed way in, and we started with ourselves zoomed out, and we went way in there, and we show what they are working on. And I got to say, if you just consider a life well lived, and there were very few but very important major elements of a completely fulfilled, realized, happy, and healthy life, it doesn't seem to include most of this stuff. So you always got to ask yourself why. And we're so submerged, we're so immersed in this racing forward technological world that maybe we don't even stop to think about where it's going and who's making it go that way. And not all bad, there are many potentially good curative, healing, or supportive medical discoveries that may come out of this, and things that could be implemented. But I question how much of that will be done versus how much of just a continuation of what we see going on now will be done. And what we see going on now is, a little bit in the medical treatment field, but what you're mainly impacted by is the invasion of privacy, your use of your consumer devices. If you were to happen to get sick, I don't know if you're going to actually be able to be the beneficiary of any medical advances that might be offshoots of this highly advanced technology. Some will. There'll be some good stuff, but I think the fraction of it is much smaller than the whole invasion side of things. So, one of the ideas here, and sort of the theme of the show is justifications for surveillance, and the some of the 5G infrastructure that goes with it. And also that one other little piece that we may or may not get to in this show, which is about ID. An ID for everybody. Is that necessary, and why? Is that going to help me in my life, or is it going to be more for the benefit of somebody else or some other organization? So in this paragraph, I want to just paraphrase through this because it's quite long, and I would really encourage everybody to just at their leisure to read through this and the parts of it that you would like to. So I'll just pull out one little sentence at the end of this, and then I'm going to move on further down. So this is the paragraph on data valence, and now surveillance, I'm right here on this. Surveillance is no longer conducted solely in an Orwellian manner, where the citizens of the state fall under the powerful gaze of the ruling elites. Rather, it is becoming more complex and fluid, operating at many levels, including what TMC was just illustrating for us, the very, very deep level of addressing, interfacing, and influencing and modifying the behavior of cells in bodies.
It gets deeper than that.
Take us there if you want.
Yeah, so the deeper level than that is being able to program the cells to express magnetically sensitive, light sensitive, chemical sensitive, pressure sensitive, temperature sensitive channels or types of expressions in the cell, whether it's inside the cell or in the cell wall, so that they can be communicated with very, very delicate, minute amounts of specifically modulated energy.
You know what I'm going to do? This will be fun. We're kind of bebopping around, but this is kind of a fun show here already. I hope everybody's enjoying it. I'm going to take us to a video, if you can believe that. And we're probably going to come back to this because there's more good stuff in here. So I would like to introduce you to Dr. Berg. And you can form your own opinion, but I think that this man does some fantastic work. He is ex-military. He is, I believe he is a doctor of osteopathy, and he has made it his business to educate people. He makes a little bit of money at it. He sells some good products, which are one of the main things about Dr. Berg. I'm actually plugging for him. So Dr. Berg, if you ever want to come on our show, you'll be more than welcome to come on with us and have a more in-depth discussion about some of the topics that are near and dear to your heart. Particularly, he's going to just take us for a little bit of a 5-minute ride about smartphones. And so there's the electromagnetic radiation that comes out of all of these devices, okay? And he's going to just give you his opinions on that. And it's only a very short video, and we will have a link to Dr. Berg in our show notes below also. So check this out. You might be interested. He is a very good presenter, and I actually hope to get to talk to this guy someday. Anyway, maybe he'll be on with us one of these days. You never know. So here he goes. TMC, if the audio's good, if it's not good, let me know. Here we go.
So today I want to talk about smartphone addictions in teens and children. Okay, it's a big problem. There was a study done in 2016 involving 1,240 parents, and they found that 50% of teens felt addicted. No surprise there. 59% of parents believed that their kids were addicted, okay? 77% of parents feel that their kids get distracted and lose attention. That's no surprise. Of course, you're going to be distracted. And 72% of teens felt that they needed to respond to text and social media immediately when they get this.
Now, this is going somewhere. Remember what we've been talking about. You gotta take a look at, like, why are these kids addicted to their smartphones and what's happening while they're addicted to it. There is this continuous flow of behavioral and physiological data coming out of the teen and into the device and going elsewhere for storage and analysis. So he goes on.
It's like text message, because texting, you get like a 95% open rate. So you have people that are just all day long just responding. It's training you to respond. Versus email, which is, I think it's only like 15 or 20%. So it's definitely a problem because you're glued to this phone and you're literally addicted. I only check text messages maybe twice a day. Same thing with email, because I found that I wasn't getting anything done at all because I'm constantly distracted. And
okay, just a perspective. I mean, I'm an old man, right? And they didn't used to have phones like this, but I've noticed that it takes more and more time slices of my time up. But I'm able to notice it because I remember a world when it wasn't like that. But if you grew up in this technological world and you're a younger person, you might never notice just how many time slices out of your day that you might be doing other things are taken up by interacting with your device. Text, it beeps, text, it beeps, text, it beeps. Oh, now I get a phone call. Now I got to do email. Now I got to do this. But if it was a young person who grew up with it, they never would know any other way of life. And that's it. Since I am older and I can look at the whole picture from that perspective, it makes me think of what it's like to be a younger person growing up in that world. It's different.
when you think about multitasking, you think you're getting more stuff done. You're not. Your power is in your attention. So you really want to do what you're doing when you're doing it and not doing something else by doing this thing over here. 78% of teens check their devices at least hourly. I think it's a lot more frequent than that. Smartphone addictions are similar to drug addictions in that they do influence the size and shape of certain parts of the brain, specifically in the gray matter, the insula and the temporal cortex, which is involved with emotion, speech, hearing, sight, memory, and self-control.
Okay, very, very, very important point that interactive behaviors in the environment outside of us. The brain is plastic, and by plastic, I mean it's flexible. I don't mean it's actually a piece of plastic. It has plasticity, and it adapts. It changes based on the environment, based on which parts of it are being used and which ones aren't. So the parts of that brain that have to be used in order to interface with that device are becoming stronger. And when those parts become stronger, by virtue of the fact that playing with the device, not playing with it, using it, call it whatever you want, is taking up more time, that means less time is being spent on other things. And so the parts of the brain that would be useful for gaining more mental acuity or agility with those other things isn't growing. That's probably shrinking while this part of the brain grows. So it's changing people's brains by way of spending a lot of time interacting with the device. Here he goes, which I think is extremely significant. I mean, obviously we're surviving it, but it's changing us.
Cool. They also found that there's more anxiety without your phone. And I think a lot of people, if they lose their phone or they forget their phone, they freak out because it's their lifeline. We depend on that phone. And the problem is just the obsessive use of this phone and what it can do to your body, which we're going to cover in a minute. There's less social interaction with people in front of you because we're communicating through the phone. And a lot of people have insomnia and fatigue.
I got to back that up. I mean, we've all seen this. We've all seen this.
In front of you because we're communicating through the...
Take a good look at that picture. Would you think of maybe talking to the person that you're sitting next to? No, don't do that. Got 16 messages in my inbox. You know the drill. We all know it. It changes people.
The phone. And a lot of people have insomnia and fatigue because of this cell phone. And so what is the real damage with our cell phones? It's the EMF, electromagnetic fields. There's two fields. One is the electric fields, which is different than the magnetic fields. I'm not going to get into the difference because I created a video on that, which I'll put a link down below. But I found when I measured my house with an EMF meter, by my bed, there was a massive magnetic field because of the wiring in the back of the wall, which I had to hire an electrician to redo because I was literally being bathed in a sea of magnetic fields. And
so just tooting our own horn, TMC, we've done previous episodes where we showed pictures, diagrams with circles and arrows and vectors and all kinds of things showing these waves. And it's true. You're hearing the same thing from a doctor now. And once again, many of the people that have been with us on this show and this channel for a long time, you're very well initiated into the awareness of this. But for any newcomers, this is real, and you're hearing it from a doctor and not just us if you go back to our older episodes. So I'll let him run on. Say again.
Yeah, I'm going to steal this real quick.
Dive in. Yeah.
I'm going to steal this real quick. I just want to show you
okay.
Home and premise power lines, an apparatus to affect brainwave entrainment over premises power lines, right? So they just put smart wiring at your meter, and then they can segment the wiring in your house. The question is, how specific can the circuits be, right? Can they segment just a circuit so you have a whole room that you modulate, one room versus another? And so you have giant electromagnetic fields that bathe the whole house, but they overlap one room versus another. Can you segment down wall to wall to wall so the leg up to the ceiling is its own controlled circuit, and the leg that goes around to the plug that's by the bed, and then the other side of the bed? So you got your nightstands with the lamps on each side, his and hers, kiss, kiss, goodnight, switch off the light. Each one of those have their own circuit or not. How sophisticated is a smart meter is the question, and here's why. Something as simple as an H bridge, which whatever, right? It's simple, which probably can be done virtually with software-defined circuits. And if you wanted to start really talking about antenna theory and antenna design, they have very sophisticated designs for antennas. They can make whatever they want, which also makes them conductors for circuits. So
you can have a software switchable H bridge. You can definitely have that.
There it is. So
and it can be switched very fast.
This patent right here basically talks about artificially modulating or changing the circadian rhythm so that if you're inside, you can make it feel like it's nighttime during the day to the body, or you make it feel like it's daytime when it's night to the body. It literally talks about jacking with circadian rhythms using the wiring in your house to do it. Here's another one, sensing a user input using the body as an antenna. And this is from Microsoft technology. And what this talks about is pairing your smartphone with the smart grid in your house, the power lines in your house, and then using the power lines as sensors. What I mean by that is this: those power lines emit electromagnetic fields. As they emit the electromagnetic fields, they can also sense when those electromagnetic fields are interfered with. And they are interfered with when you walk through them. As you move closer and further away from the source of the electromagnetic radiation,
you change the pattern of the electromagnetics as you walk through it.
That's right. You change the characteristics.
And it can sense that.
That's right. And so when it's paired to your phone, it acts as a proximity/gesture recognition functionality, where it understands your body using the electromagnetic fields and the wiring in your house that then talks to your phone, for example, as an example, to then interpret things like turning on or turning off a light with a gesture of the hand, or a television or a radio or whatever. That's the examples that they use, or similar type examples in this patent with respect to power lines. So the guy, as he's talking about this stuff, folks, it's a real thing, to the point that they can run data over it and they can use it as a sensor platform and an interface mechanism. If they can manipulate circadian rhythms in your brain, what else are they able to do if they can modulate the house wiring? What are they able to do? Are they able to create quasi-static fields so that they can manage and regulate ion membrane potentials? What do I mean by that? Well, if you look up under the Department of Energy, they hold patents for managing ion potentials across membranes. And what they talk about in that patent is being able to do so in plants, animals, and other stuff using quasi-static or complex magnetic fields. It's a combination of static magnetic fields and then known variations of an alternating magnetic field to then regulate and pulse with ion cyclotron resonance or electron cyclotron resonance, be able to pulse ions back and forth across a membrane. And when you're able to do that in a very sophisticated way, you can start doing things like modulating the brain. And in order to do that, you need to be able to create sophisticated electromagnetic fields, some static and some variable, and they all have to interfere in a very sophisticated way. So happy smart meters, and back to the video, Andy.
They have to interact in a certain way. Once again, I'm making so many references to me being like an old guy. But for any other old folks in the listening, viewing audience out there, if you ever remember, let's just talk about what you can do with a piece of wire. Once upon a time when I was a kid, my dad strung up the TV antenna up on top of the house, and we ran a wire down to the television. We only had one TV. Now, on that wire, it was actually two conductors in that wire. We were able to get signals, electrical signals, coming down that wire that were from multiple television stations. And every one of those television stations has a huge amount of, back then, it was a huge amount of information specific to the exact picture that would be on each of the channels. And of course, those were moving pictures. So on one little piece of wire, there were, I don't know, we had maybe 20, 30 stations. No, there weren't that many, maybe 20 at the most, now that I think of it. But 20 television stations on one little piece of wire. And that wasn't digital. When it's digital, now that 20 turns into like, I don't even know how many, to be honest with you, but it's going to be many, many, many thousands of different pieces of data that can come across on a single piece of wire. Now, that's if it's a wire. It also doesn't have to be a wire, because we've been talking about wireless stuff. So if this can just open you up to the idea of how much information, when you consider that if we were so fortunate as to have 20 TVs in the house, all fed by that one piece of wire, and put it through an amplifier so it could drive all the TVs, you could have 20 different television shows going off that one little piece of wire, each one of them running picture after picture at 30 frames a second with the audio as well. And that's nothing compared to the information that can be transferred digitally, either on fiber now or on wire or wirelessly. So the amount of information that can be conveyed in this, let's say this electromagnetic soup that we are now living in, is huge. Now let's go back to the wire thing, because that's what Dr. Berg was talking about. In his house, there were pieces of wire emitting electromagnetics, and they were interfering with his sleep. Well, the house is wired. There's wires all over it. Walls, ceilings, switches, devices like LED light bulbs, those things emit as well. The amount of information that can be sent or received with that complete network of wires is huge, absolutely huge. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen here. As that was just to give you a little bit of a perspective of how far we've come and how powerful it is. It is extremely, extremely powerful and capable. And all that it takes for somebody to make sense of the interaction with those electromagnetic fields is for them to have really done a good job writing software to send and receive specific signals to specific locations at particular times. And that's what we're living in. We're living in it, right? I'm surrounded by it right now in this room that I am doing this stream with TMC right now. I'm surrounded by it. Here goes Dr. Berg. He's half done.
It was massively affecting my sleep cycle. So I fixed that, bam, sleep like a baby now. All right, so EMF affects the brain, and it affects the heart mainly, but it affects other parts as well. It can even affect fertility. So if you put your cell phone in your pocket next to the gonads, you're literally sending microwaves into that area. Also, the blue light from the devices, not just your cell phone, but other devices, affects melatonin. So that's going to affect your sleep. So the main thing is damage control. How can we reduce the effect of EMFs on our body? Number one, avoid contact with your brain. Do not hold your cell phone up to your head. Also, if you have those earbuds or you have some type of earphones that go right into your brain, there's a very specific type you need to get. I think it's called earbuds or something, where there's a space between your brain and the wire. So you're not driving this current or these fields right into your brain, which is not good. Use the speaker on your phone, but keep it away from your head. Very important. And really interesting, when I was in practice, I did a series of talks to the Natural Science Institute. That's when I first got introduced to EMF, because there was a research scientist that came up to me and said, did you hear about some of the studies that they were doing on children developing brain tumors from exposure to EMF? And I'm like, really? What? So they were already involved in the research, and that increased my awareness on that connection. Number two, if you have a sleeping problem, you don't want to use the cell phone 2 to 3 hours before bed, because the blue light is going to interfere with your ability to sleep, the circadian rhythm, because it's going to affect melatonin. And the next thing is that get an EMF protection case, especially if you're carrying in your pocket. You want to limit the amount of exposure that you have to EMF by having this case.
You know what I love about Dr. Berg? He empowers us with things that we can actually do. All right, get a different type of a headset that's the air type, rather than a little Bluetooth thing that you stick into your ear, and that would protect you. And if you're going to be on phone calls, maybe use the speakerphone as opposed to holding the phone right up to the head. So he's really great because he empowers us with things. He's only got a few seconds left here. Let me let him finish up, and we can talk about it a little bit.
That can help at least reduce the exposure. All right, there you have it. But check out the videos I have down below. Hey, before you...
Thank you, Dr. Berg. And you'll find links to him. I have another one with him. I think I might go to it actually right now. Let me see if I have the right one here. Yeah, okay. This, I think, is the one. Let me see if I got the right one.
Hi guys, I wanted to create somewhat of a short video on EMF. It's a very big topic, so this is just to increase your awareness if you've never heard about EMF before, electromagnetic fields, okay? It's
All right, he's already discussed some of that. Now I'm going to go a little bit faster through this well, it's only 3 minutes long. Let's let him run it. He's going to actually show you the radiation out of various devices. This is only a 3-minute video. We're just going to let this run.
Basically, there's certain waves of energy that can damage our DNA. Some people are more sensitive to these waves than other people. However, your smartphone, Wi-Fi, your router in your house with your wireless, microwaves, Bluetooth, computer and screen, your recharger, the one that you recharge your phone right by your head of the bed, right when you're sleeping, all give out certain fields of energy that can affect your body, okay? This is a little sensing device right here, okay, that can pick up electromagnetic fields, okay? So you can get one of these if you want. Then I'll show you a cell phone. You can see that it goes off pretty intensely when, yeah, right through in here. So the closer you are to your head, you can create problems. The problem is when you do research on this, you're going to see that it says it's safe. Science said it's safe. Just like asbestos was safe for 99 years, and so was trans fats for 60 years, and smoking was safe for about 46 years. It's just a matter of time. But I see the problem because if it was out there that this created damage, could you imagine like all the different problems that could happen with the manufacturing companies? And I'm not saying, I don't want to scare people, I don't want to freak people out, but it can affect your sleep, your energy. It can increase your risk of getting a brain tumor, glioma, by 3 times if you're using this over a long period of time, very close to your head. So when you use your phone, use this speaker, okay? Try to keep this away from your head as much as possible. So when I talk on my phone, I use earbuds. I don't like talking in the phone very much. Maybe if I have to, but I don't like it. But make sure that you order the air tube headset. Okay, there's different kinds you can get. So that way it doesn't have the EMF connecting wire that's driving the energy right into your head. It's actually hollow and it's much safer. You can find these online. Search out ones that have good.
To clarify what that is, the typical earbuds have an electrical wire that goes right to the transducer, which is stuck into your ear. This, on the other hand, has the electrical transducer down here. So it's only an air hose. This is only an air hose. That's what he's talking about there, just to clarify.
Reviews and get one of those. That way it can decrease the EMF to your brain. So I put some links down below. So you can minimize the damage in your house and your office. So definitely check them out. This is measuring EMF, electromagnetic fields.
LED light or a compact fluorescent, I'm not sure which, but either of those two, those do emit electromagnetic radiation, either type. The old school incandescent light bulbs don't, but all of the new lighting does.
It's all in one? Nothing. It's all in one. Oh, wow. I think we need to position you a little bit further back. Wow. Don't put your head next to that. Oh, wow. Don't put your face next to that.
So anyway, you get the idea. I don't know if anyone's really familiar with that, but it's true. And I thought you might find that interesting. The TMC and I have our heads so far buried in this stuff, we kind of know it, almost intuitively at this point. So that was just a little divergence from what we were talking about. And now, if you see how all these things tie together, we're paying prices at the level of our health, physical health, and we're also, if you tie into our show 2 episodes ago, we're paying a price at the not only the physiological level, but the psychological level. So now Enter the next chapter. Yeah, I know. What are you thinking? You got something.
To your point.
Okay.
And to the doctor's point. Right. You have nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors. And this is a well-known patent out there for those of you that have dabbled in this idea of electromagnetics being something else, right?
Can you make that picture a little bit bigger?
We'll get there. So nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors, right? Heinrich Luce, if you want to look up the inventor, he has quite a few others. And what it talks about is using low hertz resonance that can be used to induce certain effects in people. And what it's showing here is the idea, in this case, a CRT type monitor that is oscillating, where they're able to turn on and turn off the tubes and or manipulate the color and or manipulate the flicker rate, right?
You can use this to make a person anything from lethargic to triggered, anywhere in between.
In this patent, they talk about using the tonic or mellow frequency resonances, but you're absolutely right. So here's half hertz to 2.4 hertz resonance. And what they talk about here is being able to, it says here, for the latter, the image pulsing may be embedded in programming material, or it may be overlaid by modulating a video stream, either as a radio frequency signal or a video signal. So, right, wireless signal, transmitting data communications, or a video signal such as like an over-the-air broadcast going to a set-top box to cable TV or satellite. So, I'm giving these generic terms, not necessarily to have you kind of put them all together in a linear piece, but to give you visual snaps of the different pieces of communications technology that exist around you that can be used for something like modulating signals over
it will
top
influence
of
your brain.
They'll
influence your cognitive state.
Yes, either by modulating in this example here, modulating a video stream, for example, or the radio frequency signal that's used to send the stream. Right.
I gotta mention something. Back from that analogy with that single piece of wire from the TV antenna and how much information was coming across in that piece of wire, it's not apparent. When you're tuned into just one channel on that thing, it's not apparent that all that other information is coming across. Well, this is what it's like with most of the modern electronics that we're using now. If you consider it's a little bit like an iceberg, where the tip of the iceberg is very small, and that's the part that's above the water, and usually the rest of the iceberg is maybe 10 times or more the size of what you see on the surface. So when we're using our devices, what we're seeing and hearing is we almost assume that that's all that is coming across between us and the device, but that is not the case. It's probably only about 10%. It's like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that these devices that they have done with the older ones, but now even ever so much more so with new routers, new computers, new monitors, even new lighting equipment. All right. There's so much more that comes across to us and affects us physiologically than we can ever see. But we know that it's there. But yeah, I mean, they're never going to tell you that when they market it to you and they want to sell it to you. They just want to sell the stuff and, get you your new device. So all these pictures that you're showing are good. That's, it's all this kind of stuff.
It talks about pulsed electromagnetic fields capable of exciting sensory resonances in nearby people. It may be generated even as displayed images are pulsed with subliminal intensity. So you don't even realize as you're sitting there working away at Facebook or Twitter that these things are being used to potentially modulate your brain and your nervous system to read and write software into your biologic hardware, as well as simultaneously surveil you to understand your physiologic responses. Every time you look at a video, you have to censor. Do you get off on clicking that censor button, or do you kind of not like what you're doing? And if you don't think they can measure that, I beg to differ, and I encourage you to read a little bit more about what these censor platforms can do that large companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, Amazon, and others, Microsoft, ultimately can do with all of the sensors on something like a cell phone.
Question for the chat. Have most of you guys had the occasion where, there's somebody in a room and you walk into the room, but they've been in there for a while, and you walk in there and they look like they're hypnotized. They look like they're in some sort of almost a catatonic state. And I have seen this. I'll bet everybody has that's out there listening, participating in the show. On one occasion or another, you've seen someone who looked like they were hypnotized with a device. Yes? Probably. That's all I wanted. Yeah. Go on, sir.
Anybody who has set children in front of a television for any period of time will likely have seen exactly what you're referring to, where there's a glaze and then perhaps the mouth half open ajar and a lack of responsiveness, and then general lethargy and or delayed reaction time with respect to response, and or not even an accurate response. All of these things are symptomatic of what's really going on there neurologically, as there is this ongoing and persistent pulsation, whether it be the use of light that's emitted out of the screen, sound that's emitted out of the speakers, or energy that's emitted out of the electronic components themselves as they perform their entertainment / computational function,
right?
And or do something like transmit wireless energy around for internet traffic, or transmit wireless energy for information, for the internet traffic, or transmit wireless energy for power, because that's coming online. 5G's here, and in not too much longer of a time, you're going to start seeing wireless power come online. It's going to show up probably, when it comes time to, Christmas, for example, would be a great time to launch something like that with a new product release, something like a router or a phone or a pad you get with a phone that's able to, in a room, for example, you set it on the corner of your desk, and then you can set your phone anywhere on your desk in a 3-foot proximity, for example, and your phone will charge. It doesn't matter if you're holding it or using it. It doesn't matter if it's up next to your head. It doesn't matter if it is across the desk, on the other side of you and your computer. It will still wirelessly charge. And there's technologies for that. And what that's really doing is creating resonances. All of that said, what we're looking at here are building tools and running software over these tools that deal with interfacing with biologic resonances. And the same methodologies used for biologic resonances can be used for things like transferring energy from one form into another, or transferring power from one device to another, or transferring information from one device to another. I saw something the other day. They witnessed or observed, quantum entanglement between two oscillating metal drums. So they had metal drums that were on a micro electromechanical system type form factor, and they had them in oscillation, and they got their physical vibrations of a metal drum. They got those oscillations in sync so well that they were able to determine that they had quantum entanglement occurring, and therefore then could conduct quantum communication. We're saying in this article that with what they witnessed there, understanding that they could get resonance to the specificity or granularity to achieve quantum entanglement with physical resonance of something like a metal drum. The implications for communication and for quantum internet and quantum other stuff are huge. Because what the real bottleneck there, the real bottleneck there really is this idea of superposition and superconductivity, and this notion that you have to keep things cold. And that's why the body and biology is so beautiful and so useful and so valuable, is because there are a lot of things that function in the body in the quantum state that are superconductors, or at least act as superconductors. DNA, for example, functions like a superconductor. So if you can somehow interface with biology, DNA being one thing that functions as a superconductor, you can look up, and I'm rambling again, you can look up chiral, chiral spin, or chiral proteins, or chiral biology. And what you will find there is that they are understanding the characteristics of molecular structures and atomic structures and biologic structures, and understanding that there are particular spin states that are associated that ultimately manifest into shape or morphology or phenotype based on whatever it is that you're talking about. Specifically in this example is chiral, which means that it only spins in one direction. DNA is chiral. It rotates, it is circularly polarized, for example, in one direction. And they're not all the same. And when you start understanding that stuff, you can then begin to regulate things like resonance and start understanding quantum communication and regulating quantum communication and quantum stimulation in biology. And that's where this nanotech stuff is going. And that's where the modulation of the nervous system, if you will, is just a precursor to more sophisticated sensor platforms that ultimately enable more sophisticated stimulation platforms.
Don't you feel like we're a bunch of guinea pigs?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
At that level, what would you suggest are some of the things that people can actually do to mitigate some of this? What really is it's the two words surveillance and invasion of privacy. They almost kind of meaning the same thing. That we can mitigate some of that. For example, if you have the opportunity to have, let's say, for 6 hours, maybe 8 if you're lucky, a day, have no electronics anywhere near where you sleep. That would be a thing that people could do. That means your LED light is off. That means the cell smartphone is not in that room. It's not by the bedside. Maybe you set the ringer real loud so that the thing can be out in the hallway or something, and you'll still hear it if it's an urgent call. But create a space.
Bedroom tapestries, the four post bed with the real sheer sort of linen that allows incandescent or indirect flickering light to pass through, and beautiful silhouetting, but nonetheless you're ensconced in fabric in a 4-post bed. Well, imagine if that was grounded and that fabric, as beautiful as it may retain or be something like a
Faraday cage.
Exactly, brother. So your room can be what it is, but when you get in your little nest, it's just you and whoever you're with. You know what I'm saying? And nobody else in there spying.
Well, another thing, which is there's something else that sounds beautiful, TMC. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think that we might go to work on engineering just such a type of fabric as that, and put together some kind of a kit that people can find. And maybe maybe we could make millions making a kit like that.
For those of you that want to try to embark on that kind of a journey, you're going to need to look at a multiple layer cross-sectional type of an apparatus so that you can filter out multiple frequencies and what would be known as fringe field creation. And fringe field creation is this notion where they can take electromagnetic energy and from two different origination points, beam it to the same point at a distant space. So you're actually creating what looks like a pie or a triangle, right? And where those electromagnetic beams intersect, they create interfering waves that constructively interfere and destructively interfere and do things like change frequencies that are inside the fields, as well as create adjacent electric fields, what they call fringe fields. And if it's done in other ways, you can cancel out the electric field and just have amplified magnetic fields, or vice versa. You can literally shock somebody to death remotely by canceling out the magnetic fields with offset polarization, just leaving an amplified electric field, and do something like stop their heart. That's absolutely possible. It's called a directed energy microwave weapon. But anyway, the interfering electromagnetic fields create fringe fields. So going back to this beautiful fabric, for those of you that want to embark in the textile industry, think about overlapping meshes that do things like filter out particular bandwidths of radiation. And it's important to know that, because what you can do in a more sophisticated sense is understand how to market it in an educated way, where you can educate the consumer about the frequencies that are emitted from things like their cell phone, as well as being able to ask intelligent questions like, hey, what frequencies are assigned or associated with the service provider that happens to be running the antenna that's sitting outside my house? or that's a mile away from my house. I want to know these things so that when I order custom fabric, I know what mesh overlays I need to create the right overlapping signatures to get the best bandwidth blanket coverage so that me and my little snookums can have some privacy if nowhere else in the bedroom.
Yep. The human body likes to try to repair itself, but you got to give it a chance. So if all of our all of our health depended on it, and we could just get that time and that space where the body was not being assaulted or being bombarded by all of these chaotic waveforms and electromagnetic energy, then during that time, the body would repair itself. Dr. Berg himself made reference to, he gave witness to the fact that he was not sleeping right. And after he modified the electrical wiring in his house, he was able to sleep better again. So this stuff is real. Anybody that lives near a cell phone tower, I would have to go out on a limb and say I think that might be hazardous to your health. Granted, most of what's coming out of that cell phone tower is not aimed at your house, but if you're that close to it and you live there and you're exposed to it many, many, many hours a day, because that's your home, it probably could be a bad thing. Something else that people used to be able to do much more easily would be to connect their computer by way of a wire, as opposed to having everything wireless. But there's less and less wired, and there's more and more that's wireless, and that means there's transmitted energy. But there's a good thing also, which is people are now getting more fiber optic cable in their homes, and fiber optic cable does not transmit electromagnetic waves. It's light. It's light, and it stays on the fiber. So that's another thing that as certain things, some of what happens with technology actually can be helpful to us, but a lot more of it seems to be dangerous than helpful. Just my opinion. And of course, this show is just for your entertainment.
I was thinking more about while you're talking there. I was thinking more about the.
So we're working together a couple different pieces here in this show, and they all really do tie together. It's all part of the same big picture. The companies that build these devices, these consumer grade devices that they market to us, they are always selling you on the convenience, or maybe even you need to have this to stay current. There's so much more that comes with it. And therein is that's the surveillance piece. All right. And the surveillance piece is that, the collection of all that information. That's the potential physiological harm piece. Now, the other part of the surveillance module of this whole discussion, if you will, is the psychological aspect. And we were covering that a little bit. I don't know. Let's see, we don't have too much time left. TMC, what particular things do you want to get to in this episode? Otherwise, if I go down the psychology side, that'll eat up the rest of our time for the show. Where do you want to go?
Well, I think we should potentially go down the psychology side, because we've looked at hardware extensively at this point, and we've looked at the conceptual, which we've defined, I should say, conceptually, what it is that we're really dealing with here. Is this
real
omniscient, persistent surveillance that what I really want to emphasize here, folks, is dual purpose, dual use, or more specifically, multi-use technologies. So the sensors that exist that we see as harmless may not be harmless. They are multi-purpose pieces of hardware, firmware, software, whatever you want to call it, in any of those combinations.
Yep. Well, call me old-fashioned, but I remember old light bulbs, and the new stuff, it's very streamlined, and the electronics is very miniaturized in it. But, when you buy one of those LED light bulbs, it has an oscillator in it, and an oscillator is a thing that makes frequencies, and frequencies radiate out electromagnetically, and that's what Dr. Berg was showing us with his measurement device. Wow, the world just moves forward, and you're going to be hard pressed to even find an old school incandescent light bulb anymore. But I digress a little bit. Let's pay a little bit of attention toward the psychology side. I have two good articles, and I'd like to just try to get through them. So we're going to sort of paraphrase a little bit.
This is very important. It's very important.
Let's start off, before we start skipping through it, let's at least start off with the top paragraph here. Psychological research has recently come to focus on people's knowledge and experience of surveillance. And some distinct themes have emerged that capture some of the complexity and variability of our understanding and engagement with surveillance technologies. And now I'm going to move down a little bit. Okay. Because we're short on time, but you're going to be able to read this whole thing at your leisure. I'm skipping down to this paragraph right here. A relationship between surveillance and emotion has been identified as core to everyday experiences of surveillance. And if you remember that little bit about how Dr. Berg was talking about how child's brains actually become modified by their interaction with the device and the environment, well, that neuroplasticity and that behavioral plasticity, and in a young person, that developmental plasticity is being influenced by things like surveillance out in their environment. They will grow up to be different people than somebody old like me. So the continued expansion of the surveillance society leads to the development of new social norms where the expectation that one is being surveilled starts to become normalized. Surveillance is ever present and yet absent or unnoticed. Material embodied through the CCTV camera and yet ethereal. The CCTV operator is invisible. Geographical, located in a particular space and time, yet transgeographical, transmitted to other times and spaces. So in other words, those signals are going out on the wires and then they're stored, they're archived, the surveillance cameras, etc. So all of this, and we kind of know this. We know how this stuff works. It's just there. It's kind of like, the all-seeing eye that you can't get away from, and the all-seeing ear for that matter. So the upshot of this whole thing is thoughts and feelings that emerge as a consequence of living in a highly surveilled society can be equally complex and ambiguous. Ambiguous too. For example, simultaneously producing multiple forms of spatialized effects has been called affective atmospheres. I don't even know what they mean by that. Such as effects related to security, notions of safety versus insecurity. Okay, now I know. You guys get what he's saying there. These findings relate to cultural geographical research in which experiences of surveillance are framed as laden with ambiguity and ambivalence, often appearing vague, imprecise, and incoherent. These experiences are difficult for individuals to interpret and articulate. Yeah, how do you even talk about this? It's like you just got a feeling that this is the way it is. This is the way the world is. There's your inner sanctum of whatever private space and however you envision it isn't what it could be. And going on. Because of its overbearing normalization, complexity, and clandestine character, individuals see surveillance as a complex, normalized backdrop to everyday life. They may see it as having a minimal effect on them. I've done nothing wrong. Nothing can be done about it, so why bother about it? And people will say that, but you know what? It still changes their behavior. It still changes their behavior. All right, so now maybe a little bit more on this one. I'm looking down a little bit more. Yeah, they talk about surveillance in the workplace, youth culture, and that's the end of it. So yeah, I'll read a little bit more on this last paragraph. I'm not going to go into the whole rest of it. So for some people, there's a sense of compulsion over surveillance through digital technologies. They may report feeling a pressure to use online technologies in order to avoid feeling left out of society. Don't you know what they're talking about? Of course. We're using it right now. We're using it right now. It's become woven into the fabric of our lives. And some of it's okay. It really is. But some of it isn't. And that's the dividing line. That's that line. And nobody's helping us define that line, by the way. The manufacturers, the developers, the engineers, and the companies that gather and harvest all that data, none of them are helping us draw that line in the sand, which is like going too far and beyond which you should not go. And avoiding feeling left out of the society and potentially being positioned as an old-fashioned person. One conclusion we reached was that despite proactively engaging with a range of information technologies, many people did not comprehend the extent of surveillance that is being made possible by these technologies. And that is at least 25% of the entire purpose of what we cover on this channel, all right, and in our shows and the work that we do. It is because the extent of surveillance, the extent of potential invasion, and the psychological impact and modification of our behavior and our lives is real. And it's something that we need to think about. We got to start somewhere. So fortunately, you're here with us and you've started with us, and we're going to help doing the best that we can to try to empower you with more knowledge. So it goes on. This is even more the case given the rapid pace of technological change, so that people need to update and upgrade regularly their knowledge of the new technological capabilities. So as a result, there's a need to study how these changes reshape people's everyday psychological experiences. And on this article, I'm going to leave it off right there. Unless for any compelling reason you want me to go further on this one, I'm going to go to the other one. What do you think?
No, we should keep going. I'd like to hear another perspective. Simply to illustrate out there that this is a real thing, and there are many different perspectives to have as it relates to the impact of surveillance on someone's psyche and how they live their life, how their decisions change, how their sense of comfort changes for the better or the worse.
We are not going to be able to make technology go away. We are not going. Well, it's my opinion, and once again, this is just for your entertainment. But what we can do is steer it. We can steer it.
Benign, exactly. If surveillance was benign, walking into your house and having your favorite drink poured for you, and then sitting on a pallet or a little table thing that extends out from wherever the drink came from, so you can walk by and pick it up as you're dropping off your keys, and then you go and sit down at your perfectly temperature controlled chair with the right lighting, and the music comes on, and you sit down with your drink, and out comes a visual display that shows you news or sports or whatever it is that's going on, or you continue your work in a more comfortable environment, none of which you have done anything other than just enter the space.
You just walked into the room. That's right.
Now, if there's no concern over how the surveillance is used at a environment or a society, technology that's useful like that to people existing and everybody using it, that seems like a pretty cool thing. It seems like something everybody be like, yeah, I could see myself using something like that, not having to drive a car anymore, not really having to pick up a phone anymore, doing really nothing other than wiping my ass and stuffing my face.
I'm not against
balls. You know what I mean? It sounds like a pretty good life. It sounds like a real good lazy life, but what are you trading for it? You're trading your privacy. It requires surveillance.
Well, that's it. That's what the problem is. For the sake of those conveniences, we're trading privacy. We're trading a certain amount of freedom and autonomy as well. All right. So I had two examples that ran through my mind. So what do you want to do to get around? Do you want to use a horse or do you want to use a car? What do you want to do? So how do you want to live your life? If you want to live your life with a horse, then you're going to spend a certain amount of time watering the horse, brushing the horse, feeding the horse, and making sure that the horse is happy with you. Because if it's not, next time you get near it, it'll kick you across the yard. How do you want to listen to your music when you enter into the room? do you want to have the system completely aware of not only your music collection, but the mood that you're in, and make an educated guess as to what you'd like to listen to? Or, once again, here I go, talking about when I was much younger. Would you rather have the joy of walking over to your library on the wall of your music collection, whether it be CDs, or if you go back even further, it was vinyl. Yeah, I had vinyl. And how do you want to live your life? I enjoyed when I actually had, like 33 RPM LPs, if anybody even knows what those are anymore. And it was kind of a ritual of getting out the dust preener and preening the surface of the record to get the dust off it before playing the record. But that was something that I no longer have to do anymore. So I'm totally good with MP3s. I'm totally good with digital music. That's fine. I'm a little bit of a purist about it when it's really critical about the quality of the music, because digitization takes a little bit of that away, but I'm still good with it. I don't mind technology. We cannot stop the development and the advance of technology, but what we've got to do is we've got to learn all of the details of it, and we need to learn how to steer it. So back to this article. But it's kind of like, how do you want to live your life? What do you want to spend your time doing? Do you want to spend your time preening the record, or do you just want to walk in the room and hear the music that you wanted to hear? Do you want to have to take care of the horse, or would you rather just be able to put gas in the car and then be able to go 400 miles? What would you rather do? It's choice. And how much of it do we even have a choice of? I submit to you that we aren't going to be able to make technology go away, because so much of our society would short-term completely collapse without technology at this point. So the title of this from Inverse Science is When Surveillance and Psychology Collide. We have a few minutes left. It starts out, the collection of private data is neither good nor bad. It's a reality of modern life. It has facilitated the creation of both experiences that consumers embrace and surveillance tools that the public fears, for good reason. The convenience of big data and its role in eroding norms around privacy are not at odds. People allow businesses to access their information in return for free services and for streamlined interactions. Yeah, all of the above. Yep, they're making that choice. We're making that choice. I make that choice. In fact, the one facilitates the other. The information that's given away in the transaction is added to the pool of information that is surreptitiously taken, i.e., your profile, your shopping profile, potentially allowing companies or agencies to understand you on an individual level. This is what experts are referring to when they call this the golden age of surveillance, an era that is likely to continue until the American public makes up its mind about data collection. So I would ask you, everybody out there who's participating with us tonight, and thank you so much for being here with us. Please give us your feedback as well. Would you like to trade less of a streamlined shopping experience, or whatever type of experience that you will have in a digital way? Let's say it's at your computer and browsing and maybe shopping. Would you be willing to trade less convenience and having it be a little bit slower for you to get to what you want for the sake of having more privacy? What would you like to have? And if you say, no, I kind of like it the way it is, I say, all right, then I would say to you, all right, it's going in a direction in which it's going to keep going in a direction in which it becomes more and more predictive of you, and you'll have to interact with it less and less until the point is reached at which you've become so dependent on the system to choose what it is that you wanted. I don't know if this had really happened, but I guess in my science fiction mind, I think of a time when I wouldn't even know how to choose, that I became so dependent on the system to predict what I wanted that it just selected it for me, and it did it so many times that were right so many times that I don't even think about it. And you know that little bit about how when you don't use a certain part of your brain, it kind of shrinks and it goes to sleep and it gets, its place gets taken by other things. Well, you might lose some of the capability to do all of that discriminating and discerning that you have been used to having if the system gets so good that it can figure out everything that you want before you even think of it yourself.
How do you apply that model to a child? What does that look like to a child when you have AI predicting or AI assuming or AI deciding or AI whatever? What is that? That's not automating behavior. That's not automating my own behaviors to make life convenient or allowing automation of my own behaviors. What you're doing is automating behavior. You are inserting behavior that you want automated into a blank slate.
You don't want to know the thoughts that race through my mind. Well, I'll say one of them. That kid isn't even fully alive. The kid is being robbed of some of the experience of being fully alive. That was the thought that ran through my mind. You know why I said that? Because they didn't learn how to make all those choices and discernments and decisions and that's part of the joy of life is making your own choices. That's part of the real
fusion. That's the real fusion of AI. That's the real idea of the singularity. You just nailed it right there. What it's a removal of independence within all facets of the human experience such that AI can overtake the quality of life and the quality of results so that the expectations are low enough such that AI can meet the expectations and then become the standard. Yep. And in order to do that, domestication at every level needs to happen, up to and including your own independent, intimate thoughts.
Yep, exactly.
And when we get to that point, that's when the proverbial real, singularity, if you will, they'll say it's reached, because at that point, then AI is providing the majority. Not all, but the majority of the stimuli that's ultimately making the physical world go round. What does that look like when AI is making the majority of the decisions that make the physical world go round?
How do you want to live your life? All right. We had a few choices up there. Do you want a really, really quick and painless shopping experience, or do you want to have to do more reading, more shopping, more checking, more decision-making, more mental work yourself to arrive at whatever decision you're going to make? It's really just like, whether you want the system to automatically select the perfect music for you, or whether you want to walk over to the CD cabinet, if you've even got CDs anymore, or go down your list of songs and you pick it. How do you want to live your life? And what are we losing? The more convenience we get in some of these areas, the more time we save on having to do it ourselves. But what do we use our time for instead of that? Right? What are we replacing if we don't need to use our brain for that, then that's freeing up brain time for us to do something else, which could be good. That could be a good thing. The system's so good, it orders the food that I want. It orders the clothing that I want. It prepares the music for me that I want to hear if I get back from work at whatever time. And that leaves me all that time when I don't have to do that stuff. What will I do in place of it? And is what I replace all of that part of living a life with this other stuff? Am I still living a full life? Am I happy? It's a really complex question. So if I think what I would really like to do, this is going on 2 weeks now, trying to get through this one, and this is a good one. I'd like to just say we only have a few minutes left here, and I don't know if we will, but I'd like to pick up on the remainder of this article when we reconvene with our next episode, unless we find something more pressing and interesting that we've got to bring to you. But I'm pretty much intrigued by this. Let me read a little bit more. Okay. Polls reveal that we're a mess of contradictions when it comes to privacy. 57% of Americans think it's unacceptable for the government to monitor. 52% are concerned, and 46% are not. Given that those numbers imply that 3% of Americans think that surveillance is unacceptable but aren't concerned, it's fair to say that people aren't fully getting their arms around the issue. That's right. I don't think we've addressed it soon enough, and I don't think we've addressed it deeply enough. And I'd like everybody that manages to enjoy this show think about that. The problem is likely a product of bad guys versus good guys. Once again, those famous quotes, the "I have nothing to fear" mentality. But that dialectic veils a major issue: the very real psychological effect of living under surveillance. And it is a very real psychological effect. And here we go. How monitoring is framed and described affects how people react to it. When it comes to how willing someone is to give their information, particular author, Tara Berend, Stanford Cyber Initiative Fellow Tara Berend, says that current research takes less of a psychological approach and more of an economic one. Okay. Privacy-related decisions are somewhat expected to be determined by a privacy calculus. This is a scenario in which your privacy and your data are seen as a commodity, and you have to figure out the pros and cons of trading out that commodity. Right. And that's what we already touched on. Now, some Swiss and German researchers broke down the idea of privacy calculus in a paper as a situation-specific trade-off of privacy-related risk and benefit perceptions. Well, and that it's bounded by dispositional tendencies and irrational behavior. Wow. In other words, people figure out the pros and cons, but irrationality always has its day. In a study of German university students, 78% of them said in a questionnaire that they knew that it was risky to click on a link in an email sent by a stranger. But when the students were sent an anonymous email claiming to contain a link to photos taken of them at a party, 56% of the students who said that they knew better still clicked the link. They made the choice that they'd rather take the risk and see the pictures. So, next title, social obligation triggers sharing. This is pretty deep, but it's worth thinking about. Impression management is the process, sometimes conscious, sometimes not. People use to determine and manipulate how other people see them. Dr. Berend says she found that people who are high impression managers, the ones who care a lot about how people think of them, are generally more comfortable sharing information online. And she goes on to say, it's totally counterintuitive to me. I would have thought that if you correlate with high impression management, then you'd be more worried about the information people might see on your Facebook profile or your LinkedIn. But in fact, it's the opposite. And I was thinking just like she was when I read it. Berend says the reason why this remains unclear, but it may have to do more with complying with perceived expectations. It's not that they feel more comfortable doing it, but that they feel obligated to do so. Oh boy. And yeah, and that thing, that feeling obligated, there are some other things that have been going on in American society over, the last year or so that have to do with a certain medical threat that we faced. I won't say what it is because we'd certainly like to not have our video get taken down. But that a lot of people, I have a suspicion that there are things that a lot of people did over the course of the last year that they really would have rather not done them, but they felt obligated to do so. So that is also in play in relation to privacy and whether you have privacy or not. Well, we got just a few minutes left here, TMC. There's no way we can get through this, but we tried. What do you think? Some wrap-up words and maybe a little bit of suspenseful trajectory for next episode coming up. What are your thoughts?
Well, we'll see where you and I go with our discussions. I think the psychology behind surveillance is a big deal, and it may be worth addressing again, or maybe from another approach, or just to spend some more time around it, because it really is the beginning of a greater understanding of what we want, or what maybe we think we should be having discussions about.
That's right.
Dealing with the internet.
It's a foundation. It's a precursor. Out of psychology, or out of, let's say, the behaviors that we would term as being within the category of psychology, come our emotions, our feelings. And our feelings will steer what we assign our left brain to work on. And if collectively we're able to develop a feeling of concern about privacy and surveillance, and we're able to get that out to enough people, then we'll all sort of kind of be trying to work on this in a more practical manner to come up with a plan, a method, a way to control it, or at least a way to articulate it to others. So I think that this is a foundational area that we're in right now. I think we got to go further with this. That's my vote. Your vote? What's the chat voting?
Yeah, anywhere you think we should go, I'm pretty much going to agree with you, Indy. We can talk about just about any piece of this ad nauseum.
All right. Well, you know what? Please sign us out, sign us off, and just want to really thank everybody who participates with us. Thanks. We really try. We really care, and we care about you, everybody. We're all in this together. Last words, my friend.
Good night, good day, wherever you are. If you're watching this on Restream, just stay tuned. Changes are coming.